Talk Radio, you're in to all things music.
When you said, what does making it mean to you? And I would right away say, not giving up. And I know to say that because what I discovered in songwriting is that you never cross out you never cross out anything. Whatever it is you write down, whatever it is comes to mind, you write it down. And that is a tip for songwriting, is stop judging while you're brainstorming.
Welcome to Making It with Terry Woolman, the show that explores the secrets, successes, and strategies for making it in the music biz. And now, here's your host, Terry Woolman.
Welcome to the show, and thanks for tuning in. I want to let you know how much I appreciate you joining us on our show. And if you missed our last interview, you can hear it and all of our episodes at entertalkradio.com/makingit, or download our app and take us with you. So often I get asked questions about the creative process, so I created the show to focus on what it takes to have a lasting career in the ever-changing landscape of the music business. You are really in for a treat, as I've invited my friends, some of the best and brightest in music, to share their stories on how they have influenced the music that has shaped our lives. I guarantee you're going to love it. So let's get started. My guest today is Jeff Paris. Jeff Paris is an accomplished keyboardist, guitarist, singer, and an award-winning songwriter. He has performed with Ringo Starr, Bill Withers, Stanley, Clarke, George Duke, Dan Fogelberg, Bonnie Raitt, Keb Mo, Frankie, Valli, Dave Stewart, Eric Burdon, and many other artists. Jeff's songs have been recorded by artists including Tower of Power, Jeffrey Osborne, Slash, George Duke, Sheena Easton, Billy Preston, Lita Ford, Vixen, Mr. Big, Johnny Halliday, Valeria Lynch, Coco Montoya, Robert Cray, and Keb Mo. Please welcome my guest today, Jeff Paris. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, buddy.
How are you?
I'm good. That's some pretty impressive stuff that you said about that guy. Whoever he is.
Yeah, it is impressive. I would agree with that. You know, go ahead.
No. It's just, go say what you were going to say. It's funny. It's like, it's like, what's that thing? That's not me. I just play that guy on TV.
Right. Well, I can kick this off with a quote that speaks to what you are talking about. This is from our buddy Keb Mo. The quote is, Jeff is our Swiss Army knife. He can play or sing anything. And I think that's a good description of you.
Yeah, I, focused on music as a little kid, and there was nothing ambiguous about it. I actually have a recording of myself my parents made on a little early 50s, late 40s tape recorder. I think it was called a Revere. Really great reel-to-reel thing. It was heavy as like a anvil, But that's what they had back then, because everything was huge and metallic, They had big iron transformers. And it's this shedding tape of me singing standards. And my parents coaxing me into singing and me crying and saying, I don't want to do it. Please turn that thing off and let me go do what I want to do. And what they would do is, oh, come on. And then they'd start singing, in the still of the night. They get about like half a bar into it, and I go, in the still of the night, singing my 2-year-old soprano. It was like a hum a few bars, and I'll do a 90-minute set.
Right.
So.
Barry Manilow has his version of that recording that he uses in his live show, where his grandfather took him into the little recording booth in Brooklyn, or Coney Island, I think, actually, where he's trying to coax him into singing, and Barry's going, no.
Yeah, it's like, I think even at that point, it's something that's so kind of dear to you. Even as a little kid, it's sort of like your private little thing, and you feel emotional about it, maybe because I just loved music. And so all of these instruments the genesis of all of that comes from my immediate response to being alive was like a bird. I would just and grab something and learn a lick on it, and just I felt like there was nothing that hard about going from instrument to instrument, and I had an intuitive understanding that you just, you play a note, you just play a note, and then you play another note, and then you just, then you play a lick, and then you play a couple of licks, and, you build it up. And, I'm not like a super master on everything, but I'm functional, and it's fun.
Yeah, on a lot of instruments, I didn't include mandolin and bass and, of course, accordion and probably a few others. But you're certainly adept at a lot of styles, particularly on guitar and keyboards, from jazz standards to heavy metal. You don't discern between styles in your music as a songwriter or as a journeyman, as a musician. It's one of the things I appreciate you, that you seem to embrace and approach them all with the same openness and respect and appreciation for the genre, whatever it is. And then you get inside of it and you wrap yourself around it. And then that becomes another part of your toolkit as a songwriter and as an instrumentalist and as a singer. Is that pretty accurate?
I'm an earthling, so I like.
Right.
I am being wailed on today by all kinds of people who want to talk to me at the most inopportune time. Yeah, I really, I'm that way with food. That show, that extreme, that kind of heavy guy that goes to all the different countries and he eats like the fried cockroaches and everything. I mean, that's me. I love the new and the untried, and anything that I'm attracted to everything, and everything that I'm attracted to, I want to take part in. I'm the guy who will, turn around in the middle of your conversation and I'll say, I couldn't help overhearing, and it's so interesting what you're talking about. Can I join your conversation? Usually,
right.
It's okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I my interest in music stems from my interest in people.
Right.
I love humanity, even though we're going through this horrible time, in which we are losing faith in each other. I still I just cherish people, and what people produce is art and industriousness and inventiveness. And I just celebrate that. I'm a big sci-fi nut. And the reason I love sci-fi is because I'm only going to live a certain amount of time. And then, that's going to be, and I want to take my best shot in anticipating what I'm not going to see once I'm gone. And speculative science fiction is a great way to do that. So, I mean, we're getting a little off topic, but I think for me, my musicianship isn't the sort of athletic ability to play gymnastically on an instrument and impressively. It's really just a way to reach people. It's a mechanism to connect with other people besides just talking, and there was a certain amount of, how am I going to make a buck? And I thought, well, I could have thought of this. I probably didn't, but I thought, gee, if there was a way I could just talk to people and make a buck, that'd be great. But I loved music so much that I thought, no, I'll just speak to them musically.
Right.
And, and then, that's.
There's a quote of yours, Jeff, just about being, I think, an artist and developing yourself artistically and as a human being. And the quote is, the definition of success is utilizing your potential.
Right. And that was something I told myself in the context of, I would go to these gigs when I was in my late teens and early 20s, and I was, we'll try to briefly talk about what the delay was and why I wasn't working before, but I was desperate to be accomplished, and I was practicing, and then I would get exhausted and not practice, and then I would go to a gig, and if I didn't do well on the gig, I felt so bad because I thought, well, I wasn't practicing, and I realized that the act of succeeding in the art form, regardless of the money, was so demanding that it was something that I wanted so much that I just defined success as if you have the potential to play beautifully or write beautifully, then the only thing between you're bringing that potential into reality is deliberate practice every day. Then all you have to do is deliberately practice every day, and then whatever happens at the gig, if you have a bad night, you still don't get that upset about it because you were practicing every day, and you can only do your best. Yeah. You can't do better than your best. And under certain circumstances, you can do better than expected or less than you expected. But if you have been working diligently on your craft, then you can always pat yourself on the back for showing up and giving it your best shot. But if you're, what was that guy? Was it Schubert or one of those great pianists that said, if I miss a day of practice, I know it. If I miss 2 days of practice, my family knows it. And if I miss 3 days of practice, the world knows it. So that's pretty shame-based, but there's been a lot of people
but that's not
on.
shame-based. Yeah, that's something. Joe Sample said the same thing to me. Yeah, like sitting knee to knee at the piano, and he just said exactly that same thing. So I don't think there's any shame in that. I think it's just an accurate artist perception of the reality of what it takes to stay masterful at what you do. Yeah.
And, being instrumentally proficient is one thing. Composition is another. And, we can get into that too.
Well, and I do want to focus on songwriting today because this is a beautiful opportunity to dedicate a show to the craft of songwriting and the business of songwriting. But before we go into the deep end of the pool on that, let's back up a little bit and talk about your early years, because I think it's really important in everybody's story to see where they came from, besides starting guitar at age 8 and adding keyboards at 16. And, but you didn't really get a lot of support in your family. I don't believe that you did. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is not an uncommon story, but I have had a preponderance of discussions that, I see people thanking their parents, and I have lately especially been overwhelmed by the realization that I had a real tough my musical evolution. So basically, look, I had gold-plated problems. I mean, my father was a well-known dentist and accomplished guy, but there was
right. You had food on the table and a nice house to live in, but
the thing is, my parents were very urbane and they were very cultured, and my mom especially. Well, she was fantastic. And she introduced me to music and was intuitively feeding me all of the foundation that would lead to a great music career. Unfortunately, she was doing that because there was this phrase "well-rounded" that, we're almost the same age. I think I'm maybe 10 years older than you, but coming out of the 40s, parents were into being able to, my mother wanted me to be a diplomat. Honestly, this is what she wanted. And when my music took root and began to express itself, she was excited about it because she just thought this was a great side of me. But she didn't understand that it was the core of me. And when when my parents got wind of my decision to go into music as a career, they immediately took my instruments away and sent me to a boys' boarding school up on the top of a mountain between Carpinteria and Santa Barbara, which you may not know there's actually anything there because it is just, it's the jungle of California. Right. There's a couple of Chumash Indians and that's it.
Right, and a monastery. Right.
The one thing to go right, be in Carpinteria or be in Santa Barbara. I was halfway between in no man's land on the top of a mesa. Interestingly enough, two other guys went there, Billy Steinberg and David Crosby.
No kidding.
Yeah, all of us are in different generations. I saw David backstage one time at a Keb Mo concert, and I said, we both went to Kate, and he goes, "Oh, you poor guy." so basically, they just basically it was like Tchaikovsky, his father saying, go and get a law degree or I'm going to disown you, which a lot of people don't know. So I had to go it alone. There was no Berkeley. Right. And I have been, missing what I never had. I had no musical education until I just basically emancipated myself at about 18, and I went to junior college, and I'd had some folk guitar lessons, but so.
Did you have piano lessons also?
I paid for my piano lessons at 17. I switched from I started focusing on piano. I'd always wanted to play piano, But anyway, all of my musical abilities, aside from my parents' acculturation period where they were taking me to concerts and that kind of support's important. So apparently, in spite of their prejudice against the musical career, they did all the things you're supposed to do to a certain extent, and then they reversed it and attacked it. And that was when I had to decide, was I going to be a pussy about it, or was I going to, do what I wanted to do? And I did what I wanted to do, and, talent, if there is such a thing, I guess I had it, and that counts for a lot. But I have to tell you that if you're not that talented, but you have tremendous support and you are diligent, you can still have a pretty good musical career, because I believe that talent is the smaller part of the protractor angle. They call it complementary angle and supplementary angle. The big angle is the supplementary, and that's diligence. Talent's great, but it's worthless without, sweat.
Right.
So,
and when Jeff, when you say
that's the story. However, my mother did redeem herself, and I'll tell you about that later.
Tell now before we, so we don't run out of time on that, and then we'll move into songwriting.
Well, it's a good segue into songwriting.
Okay.
So we'll get into the songwriting. So, around the same time, I was trying to decide how I was going to express my, musical, muse, whether it was going to be a player or a singer, or, I knew there were promotional tours. So I had a big goal about going on promotional tours, and I ran into a songwriter who I really admired, and we all, great guy, in my observation of dynamics of who does what, in music, and what conduit did they go down to find their happy place. when it comes to songwriting, there seems to be two kinds of songwriters. Guys who literally picked up an instrument because they needed to learn how to play so they could write songs. And the other is a person who actually just loves to play anybody's songs and then comes to songwriting through, a kind of just an evolution. They write.
Right, a need to express themselves, or
believe it or not, Bob Dylan is the latter. He's not a guy who picked up a guitar to play to write. He's a guy.
I remember reading that.
He loved songs, and he's got. Well, I'm not supposed to say, but it's something that I divined from reading Clinton Haylen's book on Bob Dylan. I suddenly realized he had a photographic memory. And he came out to Greenwich Village knowing 1,500 songs. And then Dave Van Ronk would comment on how, he played him a song, and then the next night Bob would just get up on stage and perform the song. So that's a huge tool. But Bob loved songs, and he didn't really care to write, but he found out that he could write songs. You read it in Chronicles, you realize that it was almost like a dodge. It was like a dodge. He could get paid. So what he would do is he would take public domain songs from the Elizabethan folk era, and he would just write words to them. Right. Yeah. So I always admire people who go unerringly towards songwriting as a songwriter, but most of us basically kind of sponged up other songs until it became obvious that we should, for one reason or another. Usually it's because we get pissed off at the song, what I call the organic songwriters, the ones who do it before they even learn how to play another song. They they learn to play a couple of songs, and then the next thing you know, they say, well, I wrote my own. And they're usually at first copies of other songs. And and then you step away and you find your. So I was the guy who loved to work on helping other people with their songs, and I helped this guy with his songs, and he got a record deal, and then he turned around and I put a band together for him, and then he fired all of us.
Was this in your early 20s or late teens?
No. This is like in my teens, 16, 17, 18.
That's great.
And I'd made a big sacrifice, and I was so depressed, and I realized that I was going to have to learn how to write songs. I never wanted to be that powerless again. So there were some extenuating. I mean, I obviously, as a guy who loves songs and loves good songs and knows the difference, I was poised to be, a good songwriter.
Right.
But sometimes you need a push. And the push was I got dumped and realized that I was never going to be at the mercy of another songwriter again. So, it was sort of like my next move was to sit down and wait for the doorbell to ring, in a way. I sat down at the piano with a pad and a cassette and was floundering around, getting more depressed. And, of course, I was practicing piano all the time. And my mother at the time was starting to get worried about me. She'd heard about drug casualties, and she thought maybe he's doing heroin. I mean, God knows how dramatic mothers can.
Yeah, but was that an issue for you? Were you heading down
not
a
at
drug
all. I was clean
road?
as a whistle. I've never done anything except maybe drink too much water.
Right.
So it was just ridiculous, but dramatic. And I'd moved out. I was in a little garret in Fountain Avenue. And so my mother, in a state of complete apoplexy, is watching, the Mike Douglas show and the Johnny Carson show, and Marvin Hamlish had just won the Academy Award for 2 songs, right? The way we were in the underscore for the Sting, and we absolutely have a lot in common in behaviorally, and he's very glib. And my mother called up she used the phone book. She looked under Hamlish.
Hold up. No, she did.
Yeah, she did. She called the first one, and she gets this old quavery voice. Well, not really that quavery. She gets a woman says hello, and she says, yes, is Marvin Hamlish there? And the woman says, oh, no. And she went, oh, God, I feel so stupid. I'm sorry. And she goes, wait a minute. I'm his mother. This is a true story. And the two of them bond, and she said, my son is talented. I don't know anything about music. His father's a dentist. Maybe your son is so much like him. Maybe he can talk to him. And Marvin Hamlish called me up and we had a 2-hour conversation.
Oh, wow.
And
that's great. That's so great.
Well, you need to be mentored, you know.
Yes.
It's like Stephen Sondheim was mentored by Oscar Hammerstein.
Mm-hmm.
And but he famously said that I had 7 years of mentoring from him. But honestly, God's honest truth is that first 2 hours that he spent telling me why my play was so bad, you know, and what I needed to do to improve it was even if I'd never had the 7 years, those 2 hours.
Right.
And it's true.
It was everything. Yeah.
It's true. The focus. And Marvin, who is not that touchy-feely, was just absolutely the most nurturing. I met him later, you know, and he was not that sentimental about it. But he said to me, after going through all the possibilities I could make a buck at in music, he said, "What about songwriting?" I go, "Well, you know, this is the thing now that I'm investigating." And he said, "Well, great. How many songs have you written?" And I went, well, I'm working a couple of them. And he was very quiet, and I thought, okay, that's it. I'm out. I can't, you know, now that's my last shot. And
right.
I said, I guess I'm not a songwriter. He goes, "Oh, no, you're a songwriter. You're just a songwriter who doesn't write." And I said, "Well, how many songs have you finished?" And he said, "I write 2 songs a week, a fast one and a slow one." And what he was saying to me is the most important component in your song is whether it's a hit, is it done in a timely way?
Right.
Prolificity and consistency of finishing. And I got off the phone with him and I went, 2 songs a week. Here I go. And everything that I know about songwriting, it was extrapolated from this
2-hour conversation.
Well, but that one thing, which is you got to finish 2 songs a week. So then my next thing was like, after about another week of not making any progress, I went, I need a method. I need a strategy. I got to come up. And there was no Berkeley. There was no Interlochen for me. There was no legit composition. And even if there had been at that time, Berkeley hadn't started its songwriting, you know, syllabus because Pat Pattison hadn't created it yet. That was in the future, right? Yeah. So I had to come up with, and I basically what I did to all those songwriters out there is I put my, you know, I stepped away from the piano and I pulled out all my records and I turned on the radio and I got out my legal pad and I began to count the bars and label the sections of the songs. And I began to see structural repetition.
Right. Through your analysis.
Some songs, there were what they call 3 written songs that go from beginning to end, don't repeat. There are songs that have verses and choruses. There are songs that have verses, pre-choruses and choruses. I began to model and log everything in. And at some point, very quickly, I was able to start finishing songs even before my analysis period. And I analyze everything now for structure, even now. So
I do as well.
Right.
And I find it a fascinating part of songwriting.
So another dualistic thing that you need to know is that not only do you have 2 types of songwriters, the ones who always wanted to write songs and the ones who discovered they could write songs. And there are both beautiful paths. But there are also people who write for 2 different reasons. One is the person who is looking for an art form in which they can express themselves. And they don't care about commerciality or making a buck. It's all art. It's expression. And those people don't need to listen to what I have to say. But if you are writing because you want to express a vision, but also connect with people and make money, then you're a different kind of a songwriter. And you're the kind of a songwriter that in another context could be working in Detroit making cars. You don't want to make a car that has, you know, 2 wheels on one side and 1 wheel on the other and 2 cylinders and no brakes because you think it's artistic. You want something to be roadworthy, a vehicle that anybody can drive. And you're going to construct your songs based on some research into what has been successful in the past. And, that was the process that led me to be ridiculously prolific. And prolificity is extremely lucrative because, first of all, statistically, the more songs you write, the more hits you're going to write, and the more covers you're going to get. And if you've really done your research, all of your songs will be performable. If you're guessing, and you're trying to figure it out as you go along, you're going to have stuff that ends up being slaved over that doesn't go anywhere. So that road, nobody told me to do it. Nobody told me how to do it. I divined it through this admonition by Marvin that I write 2 songs a week. And Marvin didn't write lyrics. So when I got to 2 songs a week, and by the way, I was writing by myself. I didn't even know about collaboration.
Right.
I was the worst collaborator you could ever have by the time I got published.
Right. You were used to being in charge of every nuance of the song.
All I ever said to my collaborators was, I really don't like that line. And they would say to me, well, do you got one? I go, no, but no, I don't have another. I don't have a line, but I know I don't like that one. I quickly learned that that's not how you collaborate. So,
right. It's better to be a little more solution oriented.
Yeah.
Right.
By the way, you know what my definition of a song is, right?
No, I don't.
I told you yesterday, but it's a story with musical accompaniment.
Yes.
And as a person who originally played music because I love harmony and melody, I love the non-literal qualities of music, the emotional qualities. And for many years, I would write the music first, and then I would shoehorn the lyrics in. What I found is that ultimately the reverse is more enjoyable and effective for me at this point. You get a little music going, you get a little sort of a tempo and a basic idea of what kind of song you're writing, and then you put the instrument down, you pick up your pad, and you start writing. You write the story. And whether it's in rhymes or if it's just narrative or whatever, you start honing in on the story because for me, that's what the definition of the art form, is a story with accompaniment. But, it can both be taught in school in the English department and the music department. And sometimes I feel like it would be better taught in the English department. And so did Pat.
Sure, of course. Yeah.
Pat Patterson was hired by Berkeley to be, they had a certain amount of non-musical classes in order to get a master's degree. You had to take.
Right, there were requirements. Sure.
Yeah, like they're not necessarily STEM classes, but he was hired to teach philosophy, and because they were required. And he said, "I'd like to. You don't have any songwriting here." And so this English teacher basically came in and created their songwriting department. And if my debate with everybody over this isn't more supported, you have but to look at the Nobel Prize Corporation. They have defined songs as a literary art form and not a musical art form by giving Dylan not the Nobel Prize for
best melody
for music. It's the Nobel Prize for literature. So apparently he was writing.
Leonard Cohen also. Leonard Cohen is a poet laureate. Revered and honored all around the world for his lyrics.
That's right. But Terry, the only reason I'm making a big deal about this is because for so long, the reverse has been the focus of budding songwriters, and they're so worried about voicings, and they're so worried about, bass line incorporation.
Or laying down a groove or a pocket or a loop. Oh, no. Right.
Yeah. And it is really like, spending more time on the paint job than the engine,
Right. Right.
But I'm the object of derision when I, do seminars for musos because they hate
Jeff.
that.
Yeah. I think it's great information. And so one of the things that you have said to me is of all the things that you do, songwriting is probably the most automatic, and that you've immersed yourself so completely in it for so long that you've developed a perspective about the process that's similar to martial arts guys. and that it's also become a metaphor for all things. However, it no longer pays the bills. So there's a lot in that statement.
Well, don't get me wrong. I'm 66.
Right.
And I started making good money as a songwriter when I was probably about 27. And the digital piracy issues and the cultural shift, which is almost as profound. A lot of people don't realize this, but, us musicians used to be the object of tremendous attention from a glamorous standpoint. I mean, actors wanted to be musicians. And if you remember the calendar section of the Los Angeles Times, it was like a deluxe edition of the Rolling Stone. It was like, 30 pages. And most of those pages, whether it was Dennis Hunt, Robert Hilburn, Pop, they had Popeye, and then there were these little 4 pages of movies. It eclipsed movies in the 70s. And
right.
That attention now has shifted away, and musicians are actually, sort of the butt of jokes. I remember seeing a Seinfeld, and one of the characters, Elaine, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, was saying to her friend, "Well, what was your last boyfriend?" She goes, "He was a musician." And they both roll their eyes. And I remember looking at my wife going, "We're screwed."
Yeah.
Because this is the opposite of what it's been like.
Right.
So there's been a big cultural shift. The excitement and romance over watching a person on stage taking lungfuls of air and singing, there's still a mainstream biz, but it's soft.
Well, I also want to interject. Let me interject for a moment and just let our listeners know that you had a staff position as a songwriter at A&M for about 15 years.
Well, A&M was about 3 or 4 years, and then for 8 years, I had my next deal was with Polygram Songs, which at the time they signed me, I got a great deal, but I was coming from Almo, which is A&M Records. I wrote, whole records for, I wrote Lita Ford and Y&T and all the 80s hard rock bands. But I had come from straight up pop soul. So I'd written for Jeffrey Osborne and
Billy Preston.
Right. Yeah. Actually, I in the latter days of disco, I was in a band with Gary Ferguson and Kenny Lewis and an old buddy of ours. If you don't know Gary, Gary's played with John Hyatt and Cher and all these people. But we had a band called LAX that was basically a studio band put together by some producers. And they didn't have a singer, so they hired me as a piano player. And then I came in. I said, "Who's going to sing these?" Anyway, I got the gig, and I had a disco hit. So I came from a huge hit called "All My Love." You can still see it on. My point is it was like Spinal Tap in that montage where every time music changes, they would change, right? Spinal Tap doing flower power music, Spinal Tap doing, pop soul, And so, I got, as a staff songwriter, I addressed all genres. I was perfectly poised to do that, as you mentioned it earlier, that I got into everything. And the real energy behind music was the public. It was like in America, music was like soccer was to Europe and South America. I mean, people just loved the drama of it and the romance of it, and being part of it. It was real, I mean, it was, things were at stake, that, the emotions were high and, struggles to be noticed. And, I achieved a certain amount of success. Yeah. And, so after, around 93, that was when the new millennium, sort of started to assert itself. And it was thought of as a digital piracy phenomenon, that shattered the music business. But there was also some cultural things that, people just lost interest. Let's put it this way. The audience has condensed. And you know, that's just the way things are sometimes, you know. It's not as bad as when Edison, you know, released the electric light and it put all the gas fitters out of business.
Right.
But you know, so I don't feel like a gas fitter, but you know, so strategies for continuation. And by the way, you know, I mean, I'm 66. I don't plan on, you know, quitting. So, you know, you have to utilize every bit of talent and every bit of diversity you have to keep doing it full time.
As well as stay aware of the evolution of the business that you're in so that you can continue to evolve as well.
Well, you know, that's easy to do conceptually, but there is a certain ageism that is unambiguous, and it's just something you accept. Yeah. So what it is I choose to be contemporary, but the music I'm interested in is actually, you know, traditional standard jazz now, and I put a lot of time in becoming, you know, really, you know, good at it. Right. On the other hand, there's all kinds of sort of corporate live work that I'm involved in because, you know, you got to pay rent.
Well, right. You have a family. You've got a mortgage and a family and a studio that you want to continue to keep up and working. Now,
you know, the most lucrative strategy for people who are no longer touring or you know, interested in touring or not able to tour even though they want to is underscoring. Interestingly enough, I, you know, am not inclined to do that. I don't think I have the temperament for it. Unlike Judge Kavanaugh, I'm able to admit that I don't have the temperament to be that.
Which is a quality in a person.
Well, yeah, to know my limitations. Although I would love to partner up with somebody, I probably could ease my way into it. But I really
I would
love
expect you to be great
singing
at it.
and performing. But underscoring requires a certain amount of bureaucratic and corporate comfort, because even though you're freelance, you're going to have to work with the suits, and you're going to have to, you know, you're going to have to be pretty strong and it's a very technical gig, you know. So
well, and which is not new to you. I mean, back in 1995, you started working with Aaron Spelling's Spelling Productions.
Well, I'm a guy who should be
involved in TV.
I was a great guy. I came up with song scoring as a definition for what I was doing, and I actually tried to get Spelling to hire me. I said, just give me $50,000 a year, and I'll write this stuff, and you can have it. Just take it. Take the tins and do whatever whatever, if I get some kind of royalty, great. But I said, after the second year, I said, look, just keep me on staff. You just come to me, because literally everything I wrote, and I wrote with this great songwriter buddy of mine, Rick Whitfield, who was, he's a guy who knows about 6,000 songs, and he's got titles floating in his head, and he would just come in and, work on it for 20 minutes. And then I would, go in the studio and cut. It was really quick. And it's a different kind of a thing, because they have songs that they want to, to be able to use, but are out of their price range. So you've got to not be plagiaristic and capture the essence of what it is they want. Use their I wish I had that song as basically a kind of it's an emotional kind of a pitch that they want.
Right.
And it's an example of the kind of thing they want. And then you step away from it and give them something wholly original. And Rick and I would write whole songs instead of just a minute and 55 seconds, because we would get caught up in the artistic quality. I said, it doesn't take that much more time to write a whole song than it does to write a minute and a half song. So let's just write a whole song. And I wrote some great songs. I have not been hired for that gig, song scorer, but hey, anybody, I'm available.
You are available.
I used to do it overnight with Rick. We would just, write the song. I walk in the next morning all tired out, and I handed manila envelope, and but we nailed it down and did a lot of episodes of. We did Models Inc., The Kindred, Seventh Heaven. It just, and I loved doing
Doug's first movie on Disney, The Big Green, The Substitute 2, House Arrest.
That's
so. Yeah.
House Arrest. I actually, I don't know if I wrote something for that or if I think I performed. No, I guess I did write something for that. It's all smoke and fumes now, Terry. I don't know. On to the next.
Well, okay. So Jeff, we have less than about 10 minutes left in our show. And before we get to my closing questions, what's your overall view right now in summary on how do you monetize being a songwriter, and how do you stay focused with time management and staying disciplined as a songwriter?
Well, in my world now, and understand that mastery thing, when I look back, I put more thought and more effort and more daily practice into songwriting than anything else. So it is the thing that I do effortlessly, Now, the fact that I do it effortlessly doesn't mean that I'm the best guy for the job or that I'm any great songwriter. I just know that I have an immediate
I would disagree with that. I still believe it does make you an excellent songwriter, even if you're not the right guy for the job.
Right.
So I just wanted to.
There is so much we could do a whole other thing about the creative process, as you said. So
sure,
I'll try to address that in the 15 seconds I'll have after I finish your answer. But if you are able to get a publishing deal, then you're, the reason I don't have one is because I did something really stupid. When my last deal was over, I went to a lawyer, and he was going to negotiate. The conventional wisdom is you shouldn't go market yourself. I have to tell you that you should always market yourself. You should make your own lawyer appointments. Especially if you're in my position where you had already been a proven commodity, you just call the publishing companies and you sit down and you hammer out something that you both can live with, even if it's a reduction. At the time I was looking for a new deal, the music business was collapsing, like a friggin' tesseract. It was just imploding. Right. And what this idiot did was looked at what I had a 6-figure advance on my previous deal. So he made it like a 6.5 figure, and the music business, and none of the publishing companies would bite. And,
right.
Well, I should have just gone and marketed myself. So, sense. Call the publishing companies up, bring your catalog, make your own appointments,
and then have your lawyer review the agreement for language.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. But the idea is that you don't need somebody to make the calls for you. You make the calls for yourself, in whatever way you can, and you have to get out there and be seen, and you have to have your stuff duped, and you have to just do all the logical stuff that you can possibly think of. There's whole courses now you can take in networking. But the other thing you have to do is actually write the songs. You have to actually do the work. You have to collect it, and they have to be worth buying. So, right. A little of my strategy had to do with, I know what I'm good at, and let me find a guy who's good at, networking. And so maybe there's a way to occupy, there's a middle ground for all this stuff. But there's a youth thing that everybody understands. Scriptwriters understand it, and the industry wants freshness and youth and hipness. And so if you're young, prolific, and you've done your homework, and you're not self-indulgent, and you are listening to what's successful and then anticipating what's coming, and you're getting down and you're producing your song or two a week. In Nashville, it's a song or two a day. So,
right. But they're not talking about recording and producing. They're just talking about the writing aspect in Nashville.
Oh, you finish your songs and then, you demo them up. And by the way,
right.
I don't demo things. I mean, my last cut was Robert Cray. I just put a drum loop on and played a guitar and sang the song. My last bunch of cuts for Tony Bronicle's, a couple of his blues artists, I just used a metronome and an acoustic guitar and I sang the song and I put background vocals on it. You know, I'm not trying to make a record. I don't think producers are interested in hearing the record anymore. If they ever were, that was some kind of myth because we wanted to get off on hearing our song fully produced, and who knows when that was going to be. So we'd make these demos that challenged the producer. It's better to have a great song sparsely done.
Right,
and,
I agree.
If you're not trying to originate some kind of loony thing, I just think that, knowing what you're I'm not going to say competing against. I'll say, if you go on Spotify and you go on the U.S. top 50 and you listen to the top 10 or the top 20, and then you stick your song in your computer and play a couple of those songs and then play your song and then play a couple of those songs and play your next song. If it's sitting in there and if it sounds, I mean, again, I'm not saying make a giant demo out of it, but you have to put your songs up with what the continuum of songs that you want to be a part of. You have you have to fit into that continuum. Very rarely can you come up with something perpendicular to everything that's going on. And maybe it's going to be the new style. Maybe you're, maybe you're, going to turn pop music on its ear. But that was not my strategy. My strategy was, I found out things that I loved. I found out what those things were. I mean, remember, I was a guy who loved playing music. There were songs I loved that, they predate the Beatles. I mean, I love that song. When I woke up this morning, you were on my mind.
Oh, yeah.
That's
a great song.
I mean, 98.6. 98.6. I had, or Sugar Shack
again. Yeah.
Right. Sugar Shack or, Bits and Pieces, the British Invasion stuff. I loved the music. I wanted to be a part of that music and I learned how to write that music. So, if you put yourself through that school, become functional, understand that you have to have a good story. What you're listening to isn't a great drum beat. It's really a great story with appropriate music. And if you're centered and you do the work and you get the catalog, then you have every right to divide your attention between that and the networking aspect of it. I'm not much of a networker. And my first cut was actually, I was writing songs and trying to finish songs and was absorbed in those things that I talked to you about, that Marvin stimulated in me, which was finishing the songs and making them structurally sound and making them sound as good as the Sam and Dave song that inspired me to write it, And I was jamming on those songs with a bunch of LA musicians that were my posse, and they would come out. Marty Walsh was one of them. And we would jam on my tunes. And one day the drummer, Mark Sanders, came over and said, "Give me a couple of those songs." And I said, "Man, they're not ready." It was like, I will sell no wine before it's time. Well, right. he says, "Well, look," he pulls out a cassette machine. He goes, "Just play them." I go, "Man, I'm going to clam in the middle and stop." He goes, "Then just pick it up." Anyway, he made me record these things on a piano. These are my first demos, Terry.
Yeah,
was at my acoustic piano, and him on I said, "What about drums?" And he goes, with his lap, and that was my first demo. Mark slapping his legs, and me playing the piano and singing. You made me believe your love was true. Right, right. And he calls me back a couple of days later. He goes, "You got a cut on Marilyn Scott's record." People had to come to my house and force me to give them my songs. I am that much of a hothouse flower, but I was doing the work. And so what I sort of found out was that if you really do excellent work, it's the field of dreams. If you build it, they will come.
Right.
I wouldn't suggest that as a major strategy, but there is something to be sort of absorbed by that sort of axiom of do the work, stockpile the songs. Eventually, well, at least in my situation, they found their way.
Those are right. Those are fantastic tips. That leads me to my final questions, and I let you go long because I love hearing what you have to talk about. We have about 2 minutes.
Sorry.
No, I know. So we have about 2 minutes left. So I'm going to challenge you. This could be an hour to answer these questions, but I'm giving you 2 minutes. The first is a two-part question. What does making it mean to you, both personally and professionally, since that's the name of the show? And can you share 3 tips for success that have driven your career?
All right. So right off the bat, when you said, what does making it mean to you? And I would right away say, not giving up.
Huh.
And I know to say that because what I discovered in songwriting is that you never cross out anything. Whatever it is you write down, whatever it is comes to mind, you write it down. And that is a tip for songwriting, is stop judging while you're brainstorming. Right. Okay, so not giving up is one strategy. And I think probably what I said is decide what kind of songwriter you are. And by the way, success is utilizing your potential. So if what you judge as your potential is songs that you love, even if nobody else does, then you're utilizing your potential. If you're, and you're saying making it in songwriting?
Just in life, but you've already answered that question throughout this whole interview. So, and we have 1 minute left. I'm going to hit you with the last question.
Okay.
60 seconds. At this point of your life, with everything that you know to be true, what would you tell your younger self?
Don't go to that lawyer. Just make your own meetings. You're a proven commodity. Call up the publishing companies, walk in, and don't delegate. And interestingly enough, not delegating was what led me to be one of the first songwriters to stop going to studios and just record at home. I remember Tyanna Parr.
No.
You know Ty? She's great. She was always telling me, God, every time
10 seconds left.
Every time I go to a guy to get some help, he ends up hitting on me. I said, you don't need to go to anybody. Just get out your Porta Studio. I'm going to show you how to do it. I plugged the mic in. I showed her. I said, now push that button. I taught her how to do it. Self-reliance, Terry. That's
there you go.
Really the bottom key.
And on that note, Jeff, thank you for spending the hour with me. Everybody, Jeff Paris, jeffparis.net, and go YouTube and iTunes and everywhere to find his music. And thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
All right, Terry.
Tune in again next week for another great episode of Making It with Terry Woolman.
This is Jackie Bertoni from Jackie's Groove. Come join me weekly on my journey through the music business as I take you behind the velvet rope, interviewing industry notables such as Al Di Meola, Michael McDonald, and Al Jarreau, to name but a few. Listen to their stories on being in the studios recording #1 hits and onto the stages throughout the globe. Allow me to be your music historian. You can hear me live every Monday at 2 p.m. and every Wednesday at 12 noon Pacific Standard Time or 24/7 on jackiesgroove.com. Ready to get your groove on?
Hi, this is Tim Dolbear from Eclectica Studios. I'm a full-time mixing and recording engineer. I work with Grammy winners, labels, and indie artists, using state-of-the-art digital mixing and restoration tools and the very best in analog gear. Really, though, it's my ability to bring tracks to life and fulfill your vision for your music. This has made me sought after by producers and artists worldwide. So spend your time working on music and not chasing a mix down a rabbit hole. Go to timdolbear.com and check out our free one-song mix offer.
You know what's all around you every waking moment of your life? Marketing. You're choking on it. I'm Scott Robertson, and when it comes to strategic PR, branding, and marketing, I've seen it all. And actually, I'm still seeing it because bad marketing never sleeps. Join me each week on May the Best Brand Win, right here on Intertalk Radio, and learn how to make the marketing for your brand unforgettable.
Are you serious about your music? Are you ready to run with the big dogs? The experts at Pitbull Audio have the gear to get you into the game. From leading manufacturers like Mesa Boogie, Fender, Pioneer, and American Audio. To sound your best, you need the best. Pitbull Audio can deliver in rehearsal, on stage, and into the big time. Dropping beats, shredding guitar, or making the crowd roar. Whatever you dream, Pitbull Audio can help make it happen. We are Pitbull Audio. We want you to play it loud. PitbullAudio.com.